After a long day of ministering to the multitudes, Jesus was in the back of a ship with his head on a pillow sleeping. This upset the disciples because a great storm had been hovering over their boat. The wind had caused the sea to rise up with great waves. The waves were beating against the ship, so much so that the water had been entering in and had actually filled the ship. Although Jesus had to have been wet, although Jesus had to have been in that water filling the bottom of the ship, he still slept without a care or a worry. The disciples came to him and said, "Master, carest thou not that we perish? Don't you see what's going on right now outside? Can't you feel the water that's affecting your sleep?" Jesus calmly stood, again, not really showing any care or concern. He began to speak, not just to the wind, but also, the Bible says, to the sea. He declared, "Peace, be still." The wind ceased and the waters became calm again. He looks over to the disciples. He says, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Don't you realize who is in the boat with you? Don't you understand the power that I have, not only to calm the waters, but to also rebuke the storm?" The Bible says the disciples looked at each other and they began to grow fearful. They said to each other, "What manner of man is this, that the wind and the seas obey him?" Today, there's a lot of turmoil in our world. Today, we're in the midst of great storms, tribulations. It would seem as though Jesus does not care or recognize the hardships we're going through. These storms have affected us emotionally. These storms have touched our hearts. You see, because it's the storm, the wind that is brought on from the storm that affects the water. That wind transfers its power into the water so that the water begins to rise up and cause waves. The storms in our lives are able to affect us in such a way that it causes emotional waves in our hearts. Oh, but you see, Jesus, he's not only able to speak to the storms and cause them to cease. He's not only able to speak to your tribulations and your hardships and cause them to stop, but he's also able to speak and say, "Peace, be still." Oh yes, Jesus is able to still your heart. Yes, Jesus is able to still your emotions. Jesus is able to comfort you and to help you in this time. Don't be afraid. Don't be fearful. Don't you have faith in the Lord? Don't you know who is in the boat with us? He's able to not only speak to the storm, but to the waves also.